had a 4th grade teacher who challenged me to memorize this speech. It is one of the most famous speeches in American history. And it goes, 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived, so dedicated, can long endure. We are men on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as the final resting place for those who gave their lives so that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot concentrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggle here are concentrate above our poor powers to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. And that's what we're going to talk about today, what they did there. We're going to talk about Gettysburg. We have to focus our attention on a single battle of a war. But if Gettysburg is the turning point of the Civil War, and the Civil War is a turning point in America as a nation, well, what happened at Gettysburg is pretty darn important. So far, the South has done exceedingly well militarily, but as the war kept going on, the Confederate economy was crumbling. Supplies were dwindling, and General Lee believed if his army could just threaten D.C., the North would surrender. In the first days of July 1863, 2 great armies converged at the small town of Gettysburg in southern Pennsylvania. What began as a skirmish between Union cavalry and Confederate infantry scouting for supplies, namely shoes, because the Southern Army did not have shoes to march in. Most were marching barefoot. The battle escalated into the bloodiest battle of the Civil War and of U.S. history. If the Confederates won, D.C. could fall. If the Union won, it could be a turning point, as the Confederates would run out of steam. By June of 1863, having just led his Army of Northern Virginia to a stunning victory in the Battle of Chancellorsville, Lee was now ready to take the fight to the north by invading Pennsylvania, hoping to deal them Yankees a crushing defeat on their own home turf. General Lee said more than once that he believes his men will be invincible. A successful invasion of Union territory could convince Northerners to abandon their support for Lincoln's war effort. On June 28th, with Lee's army on the move in Pennsylvania, Lincoln appointed a new general for the Army of the Potomac, George Meade, a Pennsylvanian man. This marked the 3rd change of command seen by the Army of Potomac in 1863. Along with the news of the command change, Lee soon learned that the Union troops were closer than he expected them to be. Lee's cavalry, led by Jeb Stuart, is out sort of joyriding, trying to get his name in the Yankee paper, and not doing a really good job at bringing intelligence over to Lee. Abandoning his plan to drive deeper into Pennsylvania towards Harrisburg, Lee ordered his army to concentrate at Cashtown, a tiny town located about 8 miles west of Gettysburg. By the way, the Cashtown Inn will be converted into a necessary hospital after the battle, and some say it is still haunted. I spent a night there a couple of years ago, and I didn't see any ghosts, but still, it was creepy. With nearly a dozen roads leading into and out of town, Gettysburg was a key destination for moving troops. On June 30th, a few Confederate divisions headed there in search for shoes and other supplies, and encountered 2 brigades of Union cavalry. The first shot of the battle is fired a little bit after 7 o'clock in the morning. Neither Meade nor Lee look to Gettysburg on the map and say, "We're gonna fight here." It began as an accident, and then it escalated. The first day of fighting appeared to be another Confederate victory, as the rebels drove the Yankee counterparts into retreat through the town of Gettysburg. But Union troops still held the high ground south of the town on Cemetery Ridge, which would prove crucial in the days to come. I'm not the one that goes into the details of battle strategy, but the Union setup was very nice in Gettysburg. The Army formed what we call a fishhook on high ground. They had good interior lines, so communication and reinforcement could easily move back and forth. On the other hand, the South, it took longer for them to communicate with each other. On July 2nd, Lee sought to press his advantage, launching a massive assault on both sides of the Union line. At the very end of the Union line stood the 20th Maine, commanded under Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, a professor, who said teachers can't fight. He was the end of the line, and if they fell, the whole Reb army could sweep up the Union line, leaving them all vulnerable. They were placed on top of a hill called Little Round Top, and an Alabama regiment kept advancing, and all the Maine boys were now out of bullets. Chamberlain called for a bayonet charge down the hill, taking the Alabamians prisoner. He held the ground, effectively preventing the South from winning the entire war. Way to go, Chamberlain! With over 20,000 casualties, the second day at Gettysburg will stand as one of the war's bloodiest days of fighting. General Lee tried again on July 3rd, believing his invincible army could triumph with just one more push at the center of the Union line. But the attack by fewer than 15,000 Confederate soldiers led by George Pickett was a catastrophic failure, with nearly 5,600 rebel soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. They called this Pickett's Charge. Lee didn't see the end result of the battle, but he found out after he looked to General Pickett and said, "General Pickett, sir, you must look towards your division." Pickett looked back at Lee and said, "General Lee, I have no division." The following day, Lee began preparations to move his army south in retreat. With Meade in pursuit, ultimately the Confederates dug in along the Potomac River. Meade decided to not attack them again, giving Lee's forces time to cross the river back into Virginia. When Meade didn't pursue Lee and attack, this is when Lincoln invented the facepalm, because the war could have ended right there. Casualties were high on both sides at Gettysburg, but the Confederates undoubtedly suffered more lasting damage. In all, some 28,000 Confederate soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing, comprising 1/3 of Lee's entire army, and including several of Lee's trusted subordinates. Though the Confederate general would go on to other military victories for the South, he would never again lead an invasion into the North. Gettysburg had reinvigorated the Union war effort, especially when combined with Ulysses S. Grant's near simultaneous capture of Vicksburg in the war's Western theater. The North now had complete control of the Mississippi River, and better yet, it was the 4th of July! But the clash took on even more significance in November 1863, when President Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. In one famously brief speech, Lincoln consecrated the battlefield, honored the sacrifice of the soldiers who died there, and redefined war as a struggle not just for the Union, but for the nation, quoting the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal, but now redefining it to include even those they were fighting to free from bondage, the African American. As Lincoln said, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.